Our next guest is the CEO of Great Britain Wheelchair Rugby, Jason Brisbane. Jason is also the current chair of the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region of the Global Institute of Sport. He previously worked as the head of community and grassroots development at the NFL, leading on the strategic and operational growth of the NFL flag in the UK across both schools and community settings. Jason was also the head of student services and academy tutor at Bolton Wanderers Football Club. Moreover, Jason was a professional athlete playing for the San Diego Chargers in the NFL and for teams in Finland, Spain, and Switzerland, and is a qualified teacher. I'm your host, Lorraine Moalosi. Join me as I talk to Jason Brisbane and learn more about his journey in the sports industry. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Lorraine.
Your intro, that was such a mouthful. You've done so much.
Yeah, I've tried to keep myself busy over the years. And I think I've never been afraid of a little bit of hard work and doing some things differently.
Yeah. But before we dive right in, I like to start off our sessions with a little icebreaker. Are you up for that?
Of course.
What's your favorite quote, expression, or motto, and why is it your favorite?
Well, my favorite quote it's from Marshall Goldsmith, and it's "What got you here won't get you there." And I love that because it really tells you that no matter what you achieve, no matter what you get to, if you want to get to that next level, you need to learn something new. You need to do some things differently. So yeah, I really love that, and that kind of applies to kind of my daily life really.
I think that one was for me. I think that one was for me. Wow. Wow. I've never thought about that. But it's so true that I guess because human beings, we like familiarity, we like something that feels safe, and that's often something we've done before. We always kind of tend to go back and look back on what have we done before and try to do that again to get the same success. But what you're saying is like you need to keep learning, you need to keep sort of outside of that comfort zone and keep expanding.
Definitely, and it's a case of and it's not to say that some of those core things that allowed you to achieve the success you want or get to the roles you want aren't important, but it's saying right now you need to stack on top of that. You need to stack some more skills on top of that, or actually you probably need to refine some of those skills as well. But I think also when you're moving into, if you go from something like a middle management role up into a senior leadership role, actually the way you engage with people is now going to be different, for example. So again, it's like saying, hey, the stuff that got you to that level is great, but now it's time to level up.
And you've done so much in the sports industry and with great organizations as well. Before we sort of like dissect where you are right now, can you take us back to how it all started? Was the sports industry always your passion and goal, or did this all just unfold?
It's weird because going back kind of as a youth, if we go right back, I was always that kid who didn't really know what he wanted to do. And but I did like sport. I always knew I liked sport, but I never thought it was an option. Right. I never thought, it was always a case in school, if you want to be involved in sport, you're an athlete, a coach, or a physio. Like that was the option. So it wasn't until much later when I got involved in American football, and also when I started coaching actually some of the youth players, just because I was an older player. And that's when I realized, hey, actually, I want to work in an environment where I can work with people that is connected to sport. Still had really no idea what it would look like. But then but then one thing kind of led to another, and then opportunities came up, and here we are.
Mm. And when you talk about people, you sort of see that in all the roles that you've held, that it's very people centric, or there's some kind of values driven work that you're doing with some sort of purpose and wanting to make some kind of impact. Is this a fair assessment on my side, or how would you describe your own sort of motivations in the different roles you've had so far?
No, I think you described it perfectly. I think for me, what I realized is sport gave so much to me. If it wasn't for some dedicated volunteers who spent the time in trying to develop me as an athlete, what it led to is me having some incredible experiences. So for me, it's a little bit like I want to do the same thing for people. I want to help people have great experiences and be part of that. So whether that's in education, you want people to have a great education experience and love learning and think that there's a pathway for them to, go and develop and do all the things that they want to do. And if we're in a sports organization, how can we create fantastic events, help our clubs be fantastic so their membership has a great time? So everything I do, really, I just want to make sure, can I be part of a team or lead a team that helps people have a great time? And then if you do that, I mean, when we're having fun, we're the best that we can be.
And now you are at Great Britain Wheelchair Rugby, and you mentioned just off before we started recording that you'd be heading off to the Paralympics as well. Tell us a bit more about the work that you do at GB Wheelchair Rugby.
Well, at GB Wheelchair Rugby, I think what's really special about our organisation is that we specifically cater for the disabled community, and sometimes, in a world where everything is very much getting focused on inclusion, but also kind of that mixed inclusion with able-bodied people and people with disabilities. And while I think there's a space for that, what's really important at Wheelchair Rugby is that actually we're creating a sport for disabled people. And that's who it's for, and we want them to have that space. So we've got an elite program, of course, a GB program, which is part of the Paralympics, but also we've got a thriving grassroots program as well, with 38 clubs all over the country. So for me in this role, it's really about helping a bunch of other people do their jobs as best as they can, really. And my role as CEO is really just that, that oversight, but also, trying to unlock funding, trying to open doors for people, and, trying to steady the ship.
We had a conversation during, when we're getting to know each other, about you being a CEO who's also able-bodied in the disability sports or para sports, and that there's definitely a lot of learnings on your side and a lot of things you want to do. I thought that it would be a good idea to sort of have that conversation again and just talk about what have been the learnings on your side when it comes to being in this role and now having to sort of be in someone else's shoes and really facilitate for change in that sporting area.
Well, I mean, joining this organization, it was a real eye opener. I think when you look at, especially when you look at the ED&I, the CSR space, what have you, often disability is a few pegs down. And as an able-bodied person who'd never been really around disability kind of growing up, what this has done is it makes you look at the world completely differently. You're going to restaurants, you're going in, through the tube station or what have you, and you start looking at places and realizing, hey, can a wheelchair get through here? Actually, if someone's in a chair, no, there's only step access for. That means someone can't go up those steps. What's going on? And you start to realize the serious inequalities that there are in the world. So it makes me appreciative of kind of where I am and the opportunity here to be able to grow that awareness of the sport, grow that awareness of disability, and ensure that we can continue to create a society that is more equitable for everyone.
And with the knowledge that you have now, what conversations do you think that we should be having that we're not particularly having? And I ask that specifically because you mentioned that disability is sort of in society right at the bottom of the conversation, because when it comes to EDI, we talk about gender, we talk about race, we talk about all these different layers, but there are certain things that sort of we don't really talk about. Are there any particular issues that now, with the knowledge that you have, that you wish that we spoke a bit more about?
I mean, I think one of the big ones, I think, is especially from an employment standpoint, I think, and I've just learned this on the way with conversations that I've had with people within the organization and across the community, is that sometimes for an employer, there's a perception that if someone is disabled and they're a chair user, they've got additional needs, that's going to be a massive burden on the organization, and they're going to have to make all these adaptations for the individual, and that's going to outweigh the value that this individual is going to bring. And it's not true, because what that kind of thinking does, it assumes that one, all disabilities are the same, and they're certainly not. And two, it takes away the fact that when you've got a disabled person, they view the world in a very, very different way than somebody who's not, because they've got challenges that the majority of the population don't have to deal with. So their problem solving, their perception, their openness, they come to the table with a fantastic skill set. So when leaders and organizations are saying, oh, we value diversity of thought, then you're missing a big part of society if you don't. But also back to my first point was, there's that perception that it's going to be burdensome, but the fact that all disabilities aren't equal, have the conversation first. Like, if you live in a massively, or sorry, work in an office that isn't accessible, fair enough. There's going to be some big challenges. Someone is a chair user, but have the conversation first. See what happens, and actually, what you'll probably find out is they probably need far less than you think. And then what you do is you then have a fantastic employee, and your business can grow and thrive.
Absolutely. The things we assume often are very different from what reality is. Thank you so much for sharing that. Something going back to your favorite quote, what got you here won't get you there. I think that tells me a lot about who you are as a person, but also as a leader. But can you tell us a bit more about you as a leader? What kind of leader are you? What kind of leadership style do you lean into? And I ask this just because I think your story is very interesting, because you started off like really not knowing what you want, and then sort of now you're a CEO. And I think that gives a lot of people hope, because the misconception is that, well, you need to know what you want to do by the time you're 5, and then you kind of carry on with that, right? So, what kind of leader are you?
Well, I like to think that my kind of core values as a leader are one is care. So it's really caring about the experience of the employees and of the membership, and really having that at the forefront of my mind to make sure that everybody is as close as possible, has got what they need to know themselves to do a great job. The second one is effort. And while that kind of sounds like potentially everyone should be putting in effort, actually you see a lot of leaders who don't put the effort in and aren't trying to push the organization along, or trying to put in the effort in to care about people and doing those other bits. So it's really important for me to be seen as a leader that is putting the work in and isn't prepared to get isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. And then the third one would be open-mindedness, and I think just not acting like I know it all, knowing that I don't know it all, knowing that there's far smarter people out there than me as well that I can employ and bring on board, because ultimately, the world changes so quickly, and you can't be in every single place at once. So you just need to really just have, for me, it's important to just listen, just be open-minded, not be scared to try new things, because it's in those places where you're, hey, I didn't know about that, I never thought about that, and you kind of go down those routes, incredible things often happen.
Mm. And just something that I thought about, that I'm going to be having a conversation with a safeguarding expert in the next coming weeks. And I just thought about it now as well, going back to your question about the conversations that we don't have. Part of being a leader of any organization is making sure that everyone feels safe, everyone is safe, and that everything that's needed to be in place for people to be mentally, physically, all that kind of stuff, that they're safe in any organization. Like, that's part of sort of leadership, and that's part of your role, I suppose. Um, and now I guess my question is, I wonder how challenging it is to sort of put safeguarding measures in place when maybe some things are not spoken about, or some things are not thought about. Is it, how challenging is it to make sure that, yeah, to safeguard the mental and physical safety of sort of everyone who comes into contact with GB Wheelchair Rugby?
I mean, safeguarding is a very important aspect of sport, of education, just just general well-being of people in organizations. But I think it becomes really challenging because all of our community clubs are volunteer led. So you've got people who've created these clubs out of the goodness of their hearts because they love, their passion about the sport, but a lot of them have got full-time jobs as well. So you're trying to upskill an individual in their spare time about the importance of these, these areas, and trying to put the structures and knowledge and training in place for them with only a small window of opportunity to engage with these individuals as well. And when you're a volunteer, again, working evening and weekends and trying to use all your spare time to raise money, recruit players, you're probably opening the sports hall for them potentially, and then you've got to throw this on top as well. It sometimes can be viewed as just another thing the NGB is trying to get us to do. But ultimately, safeguarding is one of those things, we've seen in recent times, when the right processes aren't placed and the right standards aren't adhered to, and there isn't real clarity on how you should treat individuals and organizations, really bad things can happen. So we've recently just done a huge review of our kind of safeguarding policies, and we're rolling out new training for both for staff internally and for the community as well, because we've all got a duty of that. Because again, people are going to have children, our friends have got children, even for adults, like we've all got a duty to ensure that everybody can have an incredible experience. And unfortunately, there are people out there who are going to do some of the wrong things. And as I said, especially as adults, but especially as leaders, we've got a duty to make sure people are safe. So it can be very challenging. It can be really challenging to get it through, but it's something that we can't let up for, because I say when it goes wrong, it changes people's, lives for the worst.
And speaking of volunteers, and earlier you mentioned about fundraising, etc. When it comes to commercial side of funding and making sure that the NGB has like all the resources it needs, I suppose whenever I read anything, and it's my job I read a lot because I need to know what I'm going to talk about when I talk to many different people. I never really read much about everything is very able body centric when it comes to commercial funding, sponsorship, etc., etc. How have you been finding that area? Is my assessment and what I see online a true reflection of what happens, or is there more to it than that?
Well, it's really challenging, right? Because I think as a Paralympic sport, of course, very fortunate to have national lottery funding through Sport England and both UK Sport, right? And that helps run elements of our performance program, and also has elements for our staffing and back office. But when you want to start going to the other elements like competition and events, we don't get funding for that. So the commercial element becomes really, really important for us for that visibility, because especially in the Paralympic sport, for some people, disability sport only exists every 4 years, right? And that's at the Paralympics, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So what we're trying to do, we've got an elite event that we run, the Quad Nations, that's been going since 2019, 2018, and we're trying to build that up. And but it costs money. It costs a lot. Venue costs have gone up 50, 60, 70% since COVID. Everything's going up, and then so it's vitally important for us. But what we found at GB Wheelchair Rugby is that there are a ton of organisations out there who are passionate about inclusion, disability sport, and what have you. So we've just had to be quite creative in the way that we've gone out for commercial sponsorship. So we created a new initiative called 28 for 28, which is only trying to bring 28 partners together on the road to the LA 2028 Paralympics, but not doing it in a sponsorship rights manner, but this is more kind of creating an investors club and actually saying, let's create a bit of a movement, a group of people together, a group of organizations that are going to happy to pull their money together to transform the sport. And for us, that's we're nearly a third of the way now with that, having launched that earlier this year. And for us, that's really worked because we know, again, not everyone necessarily wants to, it's really hard to get a 6-figure, 7-figure sums. But hey, if we can get a load of 10s and 20s, that's really going to, it's transformational for us. So it is challenging. But I think we've got a goal of bringing parasport to people on an annual basis, because it's one of the most incredible sports in the world, wheelchair rugby is, and when people see it, they fall in love with it.
And one thing that you mentioned, I don't know if you actually went into detail about it, but I'd love for us to talk a bit more about it, is your passion for doing things differently. I guess it's implied when you're a learner, you want to do things differently. But what 3 things in the sports ecosystem in general, you can be as sort of context specific as you want, but in general, what 3 things in the sports ecosystem do you wish that we as a collective sporting community could do differently, whether it's from a sponsorship or fan base or whichever perspective you choose?
I mean, I think the one thing I always think about is the way we collaborate as organizations, as individuals, and the sporting ecosystem is very competitive. You're competing for members, but I actually think that approach is flawed, right? Because you think, if you look at in any other kind of industry, right now, of course, Sainsbury's wants us to shop at Sainsbury's, and Aldi wants us to just stop at Aldi, but we'll go to Sainsbury's, Aldi's, and Tesco. But the thing with sport, right, is that it's okay for someone to play five-a-side on a Monday, wheelchair rugby on a Tuesday, like, whatever it is on a Thursday, athletics on a Friday, like, and that's actually better for society. It's better for society. And I think we need to work out, how do we get comfortable in a place of actually promoting what else is down the road for people. So people show up here and they're like, oh, because for me, I fell into American football by accident through meeting someone in college, but the team was a 10-minute bus ride from my house and I didn't know they were there. And yeah, again, volunteer club, resources, things, but this is actually why it's so important that actually as a group of sports, if we could actually say, hey, this is what's going on in your area. Actually, we only do this Tuesdays and Thursdays. Wednesdays you can pop here. That might help you with your fitness. That might help you with your ball control. That might actually help you just with meeting some new people. And I think that, for me, that collaborative piece, if we can get that right, we'll have a healthier nation, and actually we'll have a more active nation. And that whole community spirit that sport's so incredible, that crossed multiple sports, I think that's a great place to be.
So that was one. Did you have did you have two more?
Well,
That's okay if you don't.
No, I think the other one, I probably got another one, which would just be the knowledge piece as well. I think, again, just sharing knowledge, and I know there's obviously great opportunities like this on podcasts, but just trying to work out, how do we share the knowledge of the larger organizations to help the smaller organizations and the little volunteer organizations. Like, how do we get that knowledge out there better? Because even going back to your piece around the safeguarding as well, if people have got a better understanding of how to run a really great organization, no matter if you've got 20 members or you've got 50,000 members, like, how do we do a better job at sharing that? Because, again, if we do that, again, I think everybody wins. I think everybody wins. So knowledge and collaboration, for me, I think were those the most important. I don't have a third.
Do you think collaboration is truly possible, in the sense that now with sports, it's becoming this is very loaded statement I'm about to say, but it's becoming more about the commercial, about the sort of the money and the profit than the actual community, and that's really sort of advanced community values. Do you think collaboration at that level is truly possible, or would it feel like people are shooting themselves in the foot? Because if I can, and you mentioned how expensive everything is becoming as well, if I, Lorraine, can only afford to be a member at one club, does it then make sense for someone to be like, but try this one at the weekend? Do you think it's truly possible, or do you think maybe not so much?
It is tricky, and I think, maybe I'm kind of being a delusional optimist in some ways for that, but I think, once again, if you're in a place where you've got 10 members and suddenly through collaboration now you've got 30 members, your costs perhaps don't need to go up so much for membership in the next 2-3 years, because actually you've managed to get another 10 people from down the road. So you kind of have that critical mass piece that actually we can help each other to help each other, which ends up meaning the people actually involved don't have to pay so much. But I think with the commercial piece as well, there's a whole conversation around capacity as well. People are already stretched. Do they have time to do this? But it's, I suppose sometimes it's a similar conversation with the diversity conversation, where it's like, oh, that's just another thing we need to think about. But then at the same point, there's all those benefits that come with it. So if we know there's going to be a benefit of doing these things, like, we're going to need to do these things and work out a way, because we know that in the long term, it's going to benefit everybody else.
Yeah, I'm an an optimist as well. So I'm hoping that everybody collaborates, because at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, it's all about the people, it's all about the fans, it's all about the participants, it's all about us, the people, versus just serving our own organizations at any cost. But back to the question of doing things differently. Do you have any examples of any time when you tried to do things differently and then it was like, well, just stick to what's already been done, where maybe doing something differently wasn't so wise or wasn't the best, didn't provide the best outcome?
Well, I mean, there's a recent one here at Wheelchair Rugby, and the outcome ended up being okay, but I think we had a lot of learnings along the way. I would say that. I mean, it didn't start how we went. So we went to rebrand our leagues, our domestic leagues, as they were growing, because we wanted to, one, try and make them a little bit more marketable, but also two, as we're raising our social profile, marketing profile, we want to make it really clear that there's two different formats of this sport that you can play: the Paralympic version, wheelchair rugby, and you've got wheelchair rugby fives. And so how we decided to rebrand them, one thing we didn't do first is we didn't consult the community enough, and not necessarily speaking to everyone, but we did a good job of talking through, and there were some people connected to the community that said, actually, yeah, this will be fine. But if we'd gone a little bit further, we could have realized some of the issues. And then two, in our comms and communicating what we were changing, we may not have been as clear either. So what ended up happening is people thought we were changing the name of the sport when we released our rebrand. And for context, when wheelchair rugby was created, it was created for individuals with spinal injuries who essentially couldn't play any other sport, so they only had one team sport they can play. So there's a section of our community who are really protective over wheelchair rugby, and what it represents for them from a from rehabilitation, from a mental place, from a community standpoint, and they felt we were essentially taking that away, and we weren't doing that at all. So for me, this is the reason why I bring up this example, is because there was a huge backlash. Like, we had petitions going out there, we had flipping, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, all this GBWR don't know what they're doing, they're taking away the sport, what have you. And it was for me, it was the first time kind of been publicly attacked in a way of the decision that we've been made. And so we had to do a lot of work of trying to actually clarify, okay, well, actually, we're not doing this, and we're not doing this. This is why we're doing this. And now we're in a place where actually, the league names are still the same, and it's great. But I think what we got really wrong was the approach to trying to make that decision. And so we did something differently, which was the rebrand. But what we really got wrong was, actually, everybody's not in your head. You need to sometimes slow down a little bit when you go to make a decision, and actually, sometimes you need to get outside of the room to find out the questions that you've not been asking, because everybody in the room will say, hey, this is a great job, pat each other on the back. But you need to just go that little bit wider, and be really clear on your communication.
Now, you as a leader, how did you resist the urge, or maybe let's talk it generally, like emotionally, because when you know that this is not what I meant, this is what I meant, and now you're punishing me for something that I didn't actually even say, that process can really be a very mentally demanding sort of process to sort of be like, okay, what are they actually saying? Is it true? Is it false? So, what was your thought process, especially for the first time having to be publicly sort of interrogated in that sense? How did you navigate sort of taking in what they said, but also the sort of injustice of like, well, that's not exactly what we said. How did you navigate that?
It was tough. It was really tough, because I think there was the initial piece of me where it's the element of me that cares about how other people feel, and it's like, oh, actually, we've got this completely wrong. Do we just need to just get rid of it? Do we just need to just get rid of this straight away? And I had to do a lot. I'd spend a lot of time speaking to quite a few different people, and especially outside of the sport, just to get their view on it, because there's part of you that's like, I don't want to upset the apple. I don't want to upset people. I don't want to do that. But then it all kind of goes back to, at the core of it, what were you trying to achieve, right? And what are the reasons behind that? Were these all for the right reason? And then, do you believe truly that this is the right decision, and in the long term it will benefit the sport? So if you know the decision is right, but it's just the way we executed it was wrong, then that's fine. If you kind of, through strong reflection, you realize, no, actually, we've made the wrong decision here, then that's one thing. And I think you have to try and really be as objective as you can in a way. But then there's a piece of just if you really believe in it, then you've got to go with it, but then be open to the fact of what are those bits that you got wrong. But it was a tough, it was only going on for about 2 weeks, but it felt like 2 years. And again, you had that real battle in between your ears about, the for lack of a better term, the mob that are out to get you, and then trying to make sure they're happy, but then also the things you did for the right reason. But we managed to get to a nice place in the middle where it's like we didn't really need to change what we were doing, but we had to clarify what we were doing, why we were doing, what we weren't doing. But that was, again, it took a while because there was just a lot of thinking and a lot of talking and a lot of consideration, and again, a lot of battling that initial natural urge just to fix it, just fix it and make it all go away.
And to follow this line of wisdom, I believe that wisdom, well, it doesn't necessarily always come with age, but in this context, let's assume that it does. And that your 82-year-old who's achieved all of what you've achieved now and so much more is talking to the 12-year-old you that sort of didn't know what they were going to do with their lives. What do you think the conversation would say? What would you say to your 12-year-old self if you were 82 today?
Well, I know my 12-year-old self would say, "Shut up, you're lying. You've not done enough of those things." I think I think that'd be the first thing, because I think, again, from a 12-year-old me, year 6, year 7, I honestly would have no idea I'd have done half of the things that I would have done. But I think my 82-year-old, 2-year-old self would have just been, actually, you know what, you're doing all right now. The way you're approaching life, you don't have to make a decision now. You don't have to decide. And everyone else in your class wants to be a policeman or a fireman and all these kind of things, and you don't know. That's fine. But the one thing that is non-negotiable is you have to keep working hard and you have to keep trying things. And you'll be fine. And I believe that. I say that to my kids, like, you don't need to make any decisions. Just try things and try your best, and everything else will come out of that.
And what do you think 82-year-old you's impact would have been in the sports industry, or what are you hoping that it would have been?
Oof. I mean, I would have liked to left some kind of strong legacy within the industry. And for me, I'm not sure what that looks like, whether that is leading a team that creates an event or some new movement or something that really lives on, that creates a ton of impact and benefit from, whether it be wheelchair rugby or whichever sport I'm in. But I think as long as I can kind of look back and say, hey, that's still going, and I was a part of starting that, I think that'd be a nice little story for the great grandkids.
I don't know if I'm sure I didn't imagine this, but I can't quite remember the exact words that you said. But when I was asking you about if you always knew what you wanted to do, you said that you hadn't seen people, like you didn't. Yeah, now I remember. You said that you didn't know that sports was an option. Was this because like, I don't want to ask too much of a leading question, but why did you not think that it was an option for you to work in sports to the extent that you worked in at
So
that point?
why didn't I think, or why did I?
Why didn't you think it was an option for you?
I think, yeah, it was real. Okay, well, I suppose it was 2 points. Like, my dad's from the Caribbean. He's from Trinidad. So they're coming up very over like those traditional jobs. First of all, my head, if he's never heard of the job, never knows anyone in, like, that job doesn't exist. So it's like, first of all, sport. Again, if you're not great at football or whatever, just forget about it. But then through education and careers fairs, all those things you go through in secondary school, you were never exposed to anything. It was always all these other jobs, but the connection between sport and working in it just wasn't. There wasn't a connection there. Again, as I said, it was always player, coach, physio. Like that was it. So no one ever talked about, not like when you. I mean, I even see it now. It's you asking kids what they want to do, or giving them roles, and it's they actually never talk about leadership roles as well. They never say, actually, you could run this, like this head of marketing, head of ops, head of stadium ops, head of commercial, like there's CEO roles, like there's all these, and everything in between, all those different roles in between. And if you love sport, hey, this is your way to be connected to your favorite football team or your favorite sport. Like, and I think if I was told that, and I think there's probably a ton of kids now, if they're told that, they say, actually, hold on, I can be connected to be involved in sport, but actually not have to play it. That it's a great way, because you get to still you still get to live and breathe it. You still get to live and breathe it. You get to see it behind the scenes. So that was the issue. There wasn't the education there in terms of knowing what the actual opportunities were.
Is that why you're passionate about sort of teaching in general? Because you're a qualified teacher. Now you are chair of the EMEA region for the Global Institute of Sport. Does that have any connection with any of that, or is it just sort of, yeah?
Yeah, no, definitely can, because it kind of all goes back to that piece around wanting to create incredible experiences for people, right? And that education piece, and especially as you've got kind of young leaders, people who love sport, don't know what they want to do. If I can be part of an organization where we can say, hey, we can create that education, so when you come out of this, you've got a great idea of what you can do, where you can go, and what the opportunities are, and actually, and you would have networked with some great people, and I think that's a service that I think it was I would have loved to have when I was younger.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to people who are listening to you right now and want to have a meaningful and long-lasting career in the sports industry?
Uh, I suppose it's not even necessarily connected just for the sports industry. I think sometimes it's just about take yourself out of the equation sometimes and thinking about what can I give, what can I create for people, what can I create with people, what's the value I can provide that's then going to have a knock-on effect to all these different communities. Because I think when you kind of take that approach and thinking of the other people out there, I think it makes you look at things differently. It makes you evaluate things differently. When you're constantly kind of thinking about yourself and what you want, I was like, I'm not, what you need, you've got the blinkers on and you miss the opportunities. So I would say definitely no matter what you're interested, but I think especially in the sports industry, because of the team nature of it and the competitive nature of it, I think having that broader view and thinking, what can I add? How can we make this even better? If you've always got that kind of lens on it and trying to be of service, I think you'll create some great relationships in it, and it'll open a lot of opportunities.
Wonderful. That's really good advice. That's really good advice. And then, is there anything exciting that you or GB Wheelchair Rugby are working on that you'd like people to check out, or if they just want to support in general, what can they do?
Yeah, well, definitely. So I mentioned it earlier, 28 for 28. So we're looking to bring partners on board for that. So if people want more information for that, you can actually message us me on LinkedIn or go to gbwr.org.uk. But also Paralympics are coming up. They start late August, so they're going to be on Channel 4. So Wheelchair Rugby's up first, so make sure you tune in and scream GB into the TV.
Wonderful. I'm definitely going to be screaming it now. Thank you
Excellent.
so very much for a wonderful conversation and I think hope is a word that I feel from this conversation. I feel like it was a very hope-filled conversation. So thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, Lauren. It's been great speaking with you.